Hello, my name is Danielle Peterkin, and today we'll be discussing Frankenstein. Frankenstein from a feminist perspective, that is. Now you're probably wondering, why from a feminist perspective? It isn't a feminist text. Well, you'd be right. However, many aspects of the book and the writer herself can be delved into from a feminist lens. So today we'll be looking at different aspects, and I want you to think about this as we go through. Frankenstein, a non-feminist text flooded with feminist experiences. I hope you enjoy. What is feminism? Why is it so important today, and how does it relate to Frankenstein? To answer the first question, Merriam-Webster defines feminism as a theory of political, economic, and social equality of the sexes. To answer your second question, while Frankenstein cannot be considered a feminist text, aspects of the book can be analysed through a feminist lens. The feminist lens is the approach that most of our literature presents masculine patriarchal views in which the role of woman is negated or at best minimized. As an adjunct of the feminist movement in politics, the feminist critique of literature seeks to raise consciousness about the importance and unique nature of women in literature. This lens can be used to explore creation, the portrayal of women, and the way that different people parent in the book. Mary Shelley effectively wrote a story where there were no central female characters, and the book is still being used today as an argument for women's rights 200 years later. Shelley highlighted the roles and uses that women have in everyday life by exploring what it would be like without them. She explored how creation and parenting would work without women, and, spoiler alert, it turned out to create a loveless cycle of neglect and revenge. While Mary Shelley wrote a book that didn't center on any women, her life did. She lost her mother to childbirth, her birth, but was lucky enough to be influenced by her after her death. Her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, was a radical thinker at the time who believed that women were not only given a bad hand, they were not given a hand at all. What I mean by this is that women were expected to do the household chores, bear and rear children, and maintain a beautiful exterior. They were tasked with doing all of this while not being given the same education as their male counterparts. Wollstonecraft argued that women would not be able to successfully raise children without the proper education. If they were to have a son, the mother would not be able to successfully raise him. Wollstonecraft was an avid writer and published books such as The Vindication of the Rights of Women, which left behind a promising legacy for her daughter, Mary Shelley. Now that we understand who one of Mary Shelley's biggest influences was, let us talk about the text. In this presentation, we'll be using the feminist lens to analyze the portrayal of women, including their absence in Frankenstein. We will be looking into Justine's trial, Elizabeth's life and death, Victor's obsession with becoming a mother, and briefly look into how Victor received affection as a child from his mother. The best way to look at Frankenstein through a feminist lens is to answer the question that the feminist critical lens asks. Firstly, how important are the female characters? I don't think I'm being bold by saying that they are barely supporting characters. Caroline, Victor's mom, does not speak until she's on her deathbed. Elizabeth is left out of the loop for the entire book, and he originally thought of her as a pet. He calls Elizabeth his playfellow and describes her as being docile and good-tempered, yet gay and playful as a summer insect. Justine was a valued member of the family, but he would not let go of his ego long enough to save her. He was adamant that he knew that she did not kill William, and the reader knows that Victor knew who the real murderer was. In his thoughts, he said, "I suffered living torture. It was to be decided whether the result of my curiosity and lawless devices would cause the death of two of my fellow beings, one a smiling babe, full of innocence and joy, the other far more dreadfully murdered, with every aggravation of infamy that could make the murderer memorable in horror." He then continues later saying, "Now all was to be obliterated in an ignominious grave, and I the cause." Walton's sister, Margaret, is only mentioned as the recipient of letters which contain the story, but her opinion is never heard. The female characters do not add any intellect, reason, and do not possess any backbone. The involvement of female characters helps to show more about Victor than their own personalities. The women in this text are not individuals in their own right because they do not make any choices for themselves. We do not get to see any of the female characters grow or change into becoming their own person. Caroline and Justine die. Margaret never gets to speak, and Elizabeth is portrayed as a docile woman who would do anything to make Victor happy. The second question that helps us to analyze Frankenstein from the feminist critical lens is, are they credited with their own existence and their own character? This question is directly connected to the first. In most stories, you might have one or two female characters who grow and change as the plot thickens. In Frankenstein, that is not the case. None of the women are particularly important. The story focuses on Victor and the creature, and the story is told from Victor's perspective, meaning that these are his perceptions of events. The female characters are not credited with their own existence and are not their own characters. They almost seem like useless pawns in Victor's game of life. None of them evolve in any way. The most evolution that takes place among the female characters is from life to death, or almost life in the case of the female monster. The next question that the feminist critical lens asks us to answer is, in their relationships with men, how are they treated? Let's start with Walton's sister. Walton writes these letters to keep his sister updated on his life and travels. While writing, he acknowledges that he may never get a response and is okay with that. We can assume that he does not really care about her opinion or feedback, but at least he cares enough to reach out. The next relationship that we can examine is Caroline and Alphonse. Not much information is ever given about the relationship between Victor's parents besides how they met. Caroline is treated like a typical child bearer in the 1800s. The best relationship to examine to answer this question would be Victor and Elizabeth's. When Elizabeth came into Victor's life, she was regarded as a pet. She was brought in as his cousin, raised like his sister, and expected to be his wife. We do not get much dialogue between the two because they are never together. Most of their conversation is through letters because he left for Geneva to further his studies. Throughout their relationship, he is hyper-focused on her docile manner and pretty appearance. When their lives get flipped upside down because of Victor's stupid choices, Elizabeth knows that something is up and asks, "What is it that agitates you, my dear Victor? What is it you fear?" And Victor's response is to blow her off. Typical Victor. This leads to her demise that we can assume could have been avoided if Victor realized that the world does not revolve around him. You would think the man is smart enough to create the creature, so he should be able to figure out a couple of social cues and a very clear threat. The creature wanted a companion, and Victor destroyed his only chance at having one. When the creature said, "I will be with you on your wedding night," it should have been obvious that he was talking about harming Elizabeth. He could have harmed Victor right then and there, but chose not to. None of the women are equal in their relationships. While this is not surprising for the time, you'd think that the relationships would feel more connected. In this text, they are not given equal status or pedestalized. They are, however, ignored for long periods of time, like Elizabeth when Victor left to go to Geneva. The women are also patronized and demeaned. Victor doesn't want to burden Elizabeth with his mistakes and his possible death, so he lies and tells her that everything will be okay. She obviously isn't stupid. She wouldn't be asking if she didn't think something was wrong. The fourth and last question is, how much concern do male characters exhibit about women's concerns? Victor ignoring Elizabeth is a perfect example to show how little he cares about her concerns, even when they're for him. She's worried because he's on edge and tense on their wedding night, and instead of finally confessing to her, he says, "Oh, peace, peace, my love. This night all will be safe, but this night is dreadful, very dreadful." Now imagine hearing that on your wedding night. Finally married to your partner, and he says this is a really bad night. That kind of feels like a slap in the face. Unluckily for her, or maybe luckily, she didn't have to deal with him blowing her off for much longer, if you know what I mean. Another element that we can use to further the feminist look at the text is a creature's creation. Victor sets out to create life from the parts of deceased people. He has been inspired by Luigi Galvani's outdated work, and when told his time has been wasted by his professors, he ignores it and continues to progress with his crazy work. In Monty Python's A Life of Brian, Stan wants to become Loretta so that he can have children, which relates perfectly to Victor. He wants something that is impossible for him to have, or should be impossible. In Frankenstein, Victor wants to fuel his ego and create life by going against biology. He wants to create life, and instead of trying to do so with his wife-to-be Elizabeth, he decides to create a quilt of dead body parts. A living quilt, that is. This leads to an imbalance in the relationship between the creature and Victor. Victor created the creature to feed his ego, and when it worked, he was horrified at the monster, while the monster wanted comfort. Victor lacks the love and nurturing spirit that mothers have with their children. While he may have had all the tools to create the creature, he had almost none of the tools to raise it. He runs every time the creature gives him a chance to be a good father, and destroys the creature's last chance at happiness. By removing women from a creation process, balance is lost. Women were the nurturing and guiding influences in a child's life. They helped to teach him kindness and compassion, while fathers would teach life skills and earn the money for the household. Without a mother's guidance or love from anyone, the creature turns to hate. This aspect of the book helps to show that without women, children would not turn out as well adjusted as they do. This is not to discredit single-parent families, however, because that is a relatively modern concept. Single parents also usually have one or two things that Victor didn't: love for their creation and a lack of greed. Victor wanted the power and ability to grant life by going against biology, and that behavior is not typical for a single parent, or any parent for that matter. While Frankenstein may not be considered a feminist work, aspects of the book, like the portrayal of women and their absence, can be argued to be feminist and can be examined as such. If you take anything away from this presentation, remember that the book Frankenstein has managed to stay popular for over 200 years and has influenced thousands of creative pieces of work. It is a unique and unusual way of delving into some serious societal and personal topics, and for a book that isn't feminist, it has managed to leave a real impact on the feminist movement. Women were not valued as more than objects or pets, and it is evident by their relationships with people and their environments. Their absence in intellectual conversations, their ignored opinions, and docile personalities show that, especially from Victor's perspective, they are seen as toys and pawns in a game. He doesn't value them as if they were human beings with intelligence and the ability to reason, but as pretty things he can engage with as he chooses. Thank you.